You know, it's funny how some remedies just kind of stick around. They're
Yeah,
passed down through families and they
totally.
become this kind of collective wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
like honey.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
been the go-to for what seems like
For
forever.
sure.
You get a little cough,
Mhm.
sore throat, you're
Yeah.
like, grab the honey.
Yeah.
You know, that's what makes it so interesting to deep dive into.
It really does make you think, huh?
Yeah, like what is it about honey
Mm-hmm.
that has made it so popular for so long?
Right. Across so many different cultures and
Yeah,
times.
exactly.
It's fascinating.
And I know a lot of you are curious about honey,
Yeah.
especially these days,
Mhm.
with everyone being so much more aware of,
Right.
sugar and their intake, and
Absolutely.
particularly if you're managing diabetes.
Mm.
So that's exactly what we're going to deep dive into today.
Okay.
Can honey actually be a good alternative to regular sugar if you have diabetes?
All right.
We're going to explore the good, the bad, how much might be okay depending on you,
Okay.
your situation,
Right.
and whether it should be something you're eating all the time or not.
So should it be a regular part of your diet?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Sounds good.
And we've got this super interesting document here that's gonna, you know, guide us
Our guide.
through this exploration.
All right.
So let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
And I think the first thing we need to talk about is sugar,
Okay.
because that's probably the biggest question on everyone's mind
Right. Yeah.
when it comes to honey.
Definitely.
Our source material doesn't shy away from this.
No, it's pretty upfront.
It's upfront about it.
Yeah.
Honey is loaded with simple sugars.
It is.
We're talking up to 97% of its dry weight
97%.
is carbohydrates.
Wow.
So that's a significant amount.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So we really need to take a look at what those sugars actually are.
Exactly.
The main types are fructose and glucose.
Together, they make up about 80% of the dry weight.
80%. Wow.
Yeah.
So to give you a clearer picture,
Okay.
if you're thinking about 100 grams of honey,
100 grams.
which, keep in mind the amounts can vary a bit,
Right. It depends.
but roughly you're looking at about 40 grams of fructose and another 40 grams of glucose.
So 40.
Yeah, and then there are some other smaller amounts of simple sugars in there too.
Gotcha.
But I think what's so interesting is this really lines up with what we're
Yeah.
seeing in modern diets.
Absolutely.
This whole idea of overconsumption of simple sugars.
Mm.
And the source really points out that ultra-processed foods are a huge driver of this.
Oh, for sure.
We're just eating so much added sugar without even realizing it.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Sneaky little sugars.
So I think that's why when people look at the sugar content of honey,
Right.
they're immediately wary.
Yeah, I get it.
But here's where things get really interesting, because the source material brings up this group of people called the Hadza
The Hadza people. Okay.
in Tanzania.
Interesting.
They're a modern-day hunter-gatherer population.
Okay.
And what's remarkable is that during certain times of the year,
Mm.
honey makes up a huge part of their diet,
A huge part. Like, how much are we talking?
like 15% or even more of their total energy.
15%.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is.
So, like, if you were eating a 2,000 calorie diet,
Right.
that would be like 100 grams of honey a day.
100 grams a day, that's wild.
Yeah, it sounds crazy when you think about it like that.
Right. Especially with all that sugar we just talked about.
Exactly.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
They're incredibly healthy.
Really?
The Hadza has excellent body composition,
Mm.
and they have really low rates of, all those chronic diseases that are so common
Yeah.
in industrialized societies.
Right.
Heart attack, dementia, diabetes.
And they're eating all that honey. Wow. So this is what I think is so important about what our source is saying.
Okay.
It's not about demonizing single nutrients.
Right. The whole good versus bad thing.
Yeah, it's so misleading
Yeah, it can be.
because context is everything.
Context is key.
The Hadza aren't eating processed foods.
Right. Totally different diet.
They're not sitting around all day.
They're active.
Yeah, they're walking for hours every day.
Yeah.
Their lifestyle is just completely different.
Right. It's like a whole package deal.
It is. And I think that's something really important for listeners to keep in mind.
Absolutely. It's not just about one thing.
Yeah, it's about the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
So let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about this natural halo effect.
The halo effect. What's that?
So it's this idea that,
Sure.
if something's natural, it must be healthier.
I see. Yeah.
And honey definitely benefits from this.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
People see it as this pure, natural product
Right. Straight from the bees.
and automatically assume it's good for them. Yeah. And that can be a bit dangerous, right?
It can, because it can lead to overconsumption.
Mm-hmm.
If you think something's healthy, you might not think twice about how much you're eating.
Exactly. You're not paying attention.
And the food industry knows this.
Oh, they definitely know this.
They use natural on packaging all the time.
All the time.
To get people to buy their product.
Right, even if it's not really that much healthier.
Exactly.
It's marketing.
It is, and honey kind of falls into this trap.
Yeah, the natural, healthy trap.
But I think what's important for our listeners to understand is that there's more to honey than just sugar and this idea of being natural.
Right, there's more to the story.
Exactly, because it contains other compounds that might actually have some really interesting effects.
Okay, like what?
Well, we're talking about things like flavonoids and polyphenols.
Flavonoids, polyphenols, those are good things, right?
They're considered bioactive compounds.
Okay.
And the document mentions specific ones like gallic acid.
Gallic acid, all right.
Salicylic acid, ellagic acid, benzoic acid.
So those are all in honey?
Yeah, and even though they're present in smaller amounts than the sugars, researchers think they might have some health benefits.
Interesting, like what kind of benefits?
Well, for example, they might help reduce oxidative stress in the body.
Oxidative stress, that's not good, is it?
No, it's linked to all sorts of chronic diseases.
So honey could potentially help with that.
Yeah, and there's even this idea that these compounds might help moderate honey's impact on blood sugar levels.
Oh, so it might not spike your blood sugar as much.
That's the thinking.
Interesting.
Isn't that fascinating?
It is. It really makes you think about honey in a different way.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just sugar.
No, it's not.
It's more complex than that.
Okay, ready for another fascinating fact?
Hit me with it.
Honey has an incredibly long shelf life.
Like how long are we talking?
Like really long.
Okay.
They found honey in Turkey that's 9,000 years old.
9,000 years old.
Yeah, and it was still edible.
Whoa, that's insane.
Isn't that crazy?
It is. How is that even possible?
So honey is hygroscopic.
Hygroscopic? What does that mean?
Basically, it means it draws in moisture from the air.
Okay.
And that creates this environment where it's really hard for bacteria to grow.
Ah, so it's like a natural preservative.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
So it keeps itself fresh for, well, apparently thousands of years.
Apparently.
But it also seems to have some benefits for our gut, right?
Well, yeah, good point.
The document mentioned something about that?
So honey contains these things called oligosaccharides.
Oligosaccharides, okay.
And they act as prebiotics.
Prebiotics, those are good for your gut, right?
Yeah, they're basically food for the good bacteria in your gut.
So they help those good bacteria thrive.
Exactly. They help nourish them.
Gotcha.
Like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria.
Lactobacillus, bifidobacteria, those are the good guys.
They're the good guys.
Okay, cool.
And a healthy gut microbiota is so important for overall health.
It really is. It affects everything.
It does. It affects everything.
So honey is good for your gut. It's got a long shelf life.
Mm-hmm.
What else is there more?
Oh, yeah, there's more.
Okay, I'm ready.
The source mentions that honey might even play a role in preventing Helicobacter pylori.
Helicobacter pylori, that's the bacteria that can cause ulcers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So honey might help prevent ulcers?
Potentially.
That's amazing.
And there's even evidence suggesting that honey might help shorten the duration of diarrhea in children with gastroenteritis.
Wow, that's helpful.
Yeah, so it's not just about sweetness.
It really isn't.
It seems to have all these other potential benefits.
Right, it's like a multitasker.
And now for the really surprising part.
Okay, what is it?
The relationship between honey and blood sugar control.
Wait, what? I thought honey was high in sugar.
It is, but there are actually a ton of studies
Really?
looking at using honey in people with both type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
To help manage their blood sugar?
Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive.
It does, right?
Yeah, how could something that's mostly glucose and fructose be good for blood sugar?
Well, here's the hypothesis.
Okay.
It's thought that the combination of fructose, which has a lower glycemic index than glucose, along with the minerals in honey.
Minerals? What kind of minerals?
Things like selenium, zinc, copper, vanadium, and the antioxidant compounds.
So it's like a whole team working together.
Yeah, might actually lead to a more favorable blood sugar response.
More favorable than what?
Than if you were just eating table sugar.
Table sugar, so like sucrose.
Yeah, sucrose or other refined sweeteners.
Okay, I'm starting to get it.
And the studies often compare honey to sucrose.
Okay.
And what they're finding is really interesting.
Exciting.
Honey often shows better results for things like body weight, blood sugar control,
all right,
cholesterol levels,
wow,
triglyceride levels.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it is.
So does this mean that people with diabetes should start eating a lot of honey?
Well, no, that's not what the source is saying.
Okay.
But it does mean that we shouldn't just lump honey in with table sugar.
It's not the same thing.
It's not. It's more complex than that.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot more to honey than we think.
There really is.
It's not just a simple sweetener.
It's not.
It's got all this other stuff going on.
And the source even mentions that there are indexed studies.
Index studies.
That support using honey in people with diabetes.
Interesting.
And there are also preclinical studies.
Preclinical, so like animal studies.
Yeah, using animal models.
Okay.
That have shown a whole range of potential benefits.
Like what kind of benefits?
Things like antioxidant effects.
Antioxidant. Okay.
Liver protecting effects, heart protecting effects.
So it's good for your liver, good for your heart.
Yeah, potentially.
This is amazing.
Antibacterial effects.
Antibacterial.
Yeah, anti-inflammatory effects.
Anti-inflammatory. That's important.
And even anti-tumor effects.
Anti-tumor? Are you serious?
Yeah. But of course we have to remember that animal studies don't always translate to humans.
Right. That's an important point.
So we can't say for sure that honey is going to cure all these things in people.
Yeah, we need more research.
But it's definitely adding to the evidence that honey is more than just simple sugars.
It's a complex substance.
It is. And speaking of complexity, let's talk about monofloral honeys.
Monofloral honeys, I've heard of those.
So those are honeys that are made primarily from the nectar of a single type of flower.
Oh, interesting.
And they can have even greater antibacterial activity.
Even greater? How is that possible?
So it's because of certain compounds like glucose oxidase.
Glucose oxidase, okay.
Which produces hydrogen peroxide.
Hydrogen peroxide, I know that's a powerful disinfectant.
And also phenolic compounds like pinosembrin.
Pinosembrin, all right.
And these compounds have been shown to be effective against certain bacteria.
Which bacteria are we talking about?
The source mentions Helicobacter pylori.
Helicobacter pylori again, okay.
Pseudomonas aeruginosa and Salmonella enterica.
Salmonella, that's a nasty one.
Yeah, but it's really important to remember that honey is not a substitute for antibiotics.
Right, don't go self-treating serious infections with honey.
Exactly. It's not a replacement for conventional medical treatment.
Agreed.
And the document also mentions that honey has shown some antifungal properties.
Antifungal, too?
Yeah, against certain types of candida.
Wow, honey really does seem to have a lot of tricks up its sleeve.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
And I think that's the key takeaway here.
Okay.
This whole honey good, sugar bad thing.
Right, that oversimplified view.
It's just too simplistic.
Yeah, there's more to it.
It's an oversimplification.
It's about nuance.
It is.
And context.
And one really important thing is the quality of the honey.
Quality, yeah, that makes sense.
You want to choose pure, unrefined honey.
Okay.
Not the processed stuff you often find in supermarkets.
Right. The more natural, the better.
Yeah, because that's where you're going to get those beneficial nutritional properties.
Makes sense.
And unfortunately, honey adulteration is still a problem in some places.
Honey adulteration, so like fake honey.
Yeah, basically.
Wow, I didn't know that was a thing.
So it's something to be aware of.
Definitely something to keep in mind.
And then, the botanical and geographical origin of the honey can also impact its composition.
So where the honey comes from matters.
It does. For example, the ratio of fructose to glucose can vary a lot.
Depending on the flowers the bees visited.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
And a great example is Manuka honey from New Zealand.
Manuka honey, I've heard of that.
It's known for its high levels of methylglyoxal.
Methylglyoxal? What's that?
It's a compound that gives Manuka honey its potent antibacterial properties.
Ah, so that's what makes it so special.
Yeah, so not all honeys are created equal.
Right, they're not all the same.
So as we wrap up here,
what
are some concluding thoughts on honey as a sweetener?
Yeah, for our listeners who might be thinking about using it.
Well, our source is very clear. Honey is rich in simple sugars.
Yeah.
There's no denying that.
Right, fructose and glucose.
Fructose and glucose.
What?
But it makes a strong case that honey is a more complete food. Than a refined table sugar. And that there's growing evidence to suggest it might have some health benefits.
So it's more than just empty calories.
Yeah, and we have to be cautious about any claims of it being a cure-all.
Right, let's not get carried away.
But it's clear that the type of honey matters.
Right, and how much you eat.
Exactly.
So can you use honey as a sweetener?
Well, the general answer seems to be yes. But the quantity is key.
It all comes down to quantity.
And it really depends on your individual context.
So how much is,
So the source gives some general guidelines.
Let's hear them.
If you have a more sedentary lifestyle.
Okay.
And you don't exercise regularly. limiting your intake to about 15 to 20 grams a day.
15 to 20 grams, that's about a tablespoon, right?
Yeah, about a tablespoon seems reasonable.
Okay.
That's enough to sweeten your tea or your yogurt.
Yeah, makes sense.
But if you're more active and you're exercising regularly, like more than 3 or 4 hours a week, and you're paying attention to your overall diet,
right. It's all about balance.
then a slightly higher intake might be okay.
Right.
But always remember, moderation is key.
Moderation is always key.
Yeah, no matter what you're eating.
Right, even with healthy things.
Exactly.
So the bottom line is, honey is not the devil.
It's not.
It's not evil table sugar.
No, and we shouldn't group it in with ultra-processed foods.
Exactly. It's a different beast.
And it's more nuanced than that.
It's more nuanced. It's more complex.
And, for some people, like endurance athletes, or people with really physically demanding jobs, a slightly higher intake of simple sugars from a whole food source like honey might actually be beneficial.
Yeah. So it's not always a bad thing.
It's not always a bad thing.
It depends.
It depends.
It's all about context.
So for our listeners out there, we want to know, do you use honey?
Yeah, tell us.
And if so, how do you use it? And how much do you use?
We're curious.
We're really curious.
I think the main takeaway from this whole deep dive is that honey is so much more than just simple sugar.
Yeah.
It's got all this other stuff going on.
And its effects really depend on you.
On you as an individual.
Yeah, your health status, your activity level, and the type of honey you're eating.
Exactly.
So on that note, here's a final thought to leave you with.
All right, hit me.
Given everything we've learned about honey, and how complex it is, shouldn't we be looking at other natural sweeteners the same way?
That's a good point.
Like, do they deserve a deeper look?
Yeah.
More nuanced examination?
Right. Beyond those simple labels.
Exactly.
Food for thought.
Food for thought. All right. That's our deep dive on honey.
That was a good one.
I hope you learned something.
I know I did.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Sounds good.
Bye, everyone.